Hello, I am glad to see you on my channel. Support the channel by liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. It's a small effort for you, and for me it's motivation to create new videos. Enjoy watching. My name is James. I'm almost 30, I'm tall, with an athletic build, a pretty face, and a good income. I have always been popular with women. I have been in many relationships, but after a week I felt restless and detached. I think this was because I was always afraid of vulnerability. The deeper the connection, the more insecure I felt. I craved the thrill of attraction, but struggled to cope with the burden of commitment. It was a vicious cycle that I couldn't break, remaining unsatisfied and unwilling to change. I'd only known my fiancée, Amanda, for 6 months before she announced she was pregnant. That's when I decided it was time to grow up and propose to her. Amanda went to her parents' house for the weekend, and my friend Robert came over. We had a drink in the kitchen while he talked about his wife Emily and their financial difficulties. I nodded, hoping there wouldn't be such tension in my own marriage. Robert had gotten quite drunk, and I told him he could sleep on the couch. Later, the doorbell rang. It was Emily. She entered my apartment and, seeing her husband passed out on the couch, tried unsuccessfully to wake him up. He was completely unconscious. I offered to keep him overnight since it was past midnight, and he would be more rested before the long morning trek to work. Emily looked upset, but nodded in agreement. As she headed for the front door, I couldn't help but notice how exhausted she looked. It wasn't just physical fatigue, it seemed to be the weight of her disappointment in Robert pressing down on her. In that moment, I felt a rush of sympathy, and perhaps something more. "Look, maybe we can sit and talk for a while," I said, my voice softer than before. I gestured to the half-empty bottle of alcohol on the counter. Robert went down so fast I didn't even have time to finish my drink. "Perhaps this will help you distress." I gestured to the half-empty bottle of alcohol. Robert left so fast I didn't even have time to finish my drink. I offered her a drink and a seat if she wanted to stay. After a moment's hesitation, she agreed. She sat across from me in the kitchen and began to tell her side of the story. All the same complaints, but from her point of view. To be honest, I sympathized more with Emily than Robert. She talked about how hard she was working, how she was juggling work and keeping the house in order. And Robert, she said, didn't appreciate her efforts. I couldn't help but stare at her. She was amazing. I didn't understand Robert at all. He was lucky to have her. Emily worked hard, bought herself a car, kept their house clean, and always made sure there was warm food on the table. She was the complete opposite of Amanda, who was used to leaning on me financially. Amanda was certainly beautiful, but she wasn't as independent and driven as Emily. Emily's dark curls framed her face perfectly, and her full lips curved in a crooked smile as she sipped her drink. She was wearing a short dress that showed off her long legs, which were elegantly crossed. "Why don't you leave him?" I asked bluntly. She seemed taken aback by my question, especially since Robert was my friend. "I don't know," she admitted after a pause. "I've thought about it, but we've been together for so long. I guess I'm waiting for some kind of push." Her gaze lingered on me, and a slight smile played on her lips. An awkward silence followed. "It's getting late. Time for bed," she said, getting up and starting to clear the table. "I'll take care of it," I said, reaching for the plate in her hands. But in our haste, the empty plate slipped, shattered, and fell to the floor. "Oh no," we both exclaimed, leaning over at the same time and accidentally bumping our foreheads together. "Sorry," I said, rubbing my forehead. She laughed softly, doing the same. We were so close that I could hear her rapid heartbeat. Without thinking, I ran my hand over her cheek. She looked up at me, searching her eyes, and then leaned in for a kiss. Pulled her closer to me by the waist. Doubts flashed through my mind, but they dissipated almost instantly. I picked her up in my arms and carried her into the guest room, closing the door behind us. The next morning I woke her up early and suggested we go back to the couch before Robert woke up. We got ready as if nothing had happened. By the time we left the apartment, we felt like we were playing roles in a perfectly ordinary morning. Life went on, but the night remained unspoken between us. As the day wore on, I couldn't stop replaying the events of the night in my mind. At work, all my thoughts were occupied with Emily, her laughter, the way her lips curved into a smile, the warmth of her touch. I was distracted, unable to focus on the tasks in front of me. Even during breaks, I caught myself staring off into space, wondering if she was thinking of me too. When I got home, the apartment was eerily quiet. Robert had left, and I assumed Emily had returned with him. I looked at the couch where he had slept the night before and mentally replayed the scene. It seemed surreal, as if our intimacy had been a fleeting dream. But it wasn't. It had happened, and I couldn't ignore the pull toward her. Days passed, and I tried to chase thoughts of Emily away from me. Amanda returned from her trip, and life seemed to fall back into its normal rhythm. But the spark I felt in my relationship with Emily was still there, casting a shadow over my interactions with Amanda. Every time Amanda talked about wedding plans or a baby, I nodded and smiled, but my heart wasn't in it. Guilt gnawed at me, but I couldn't bring myself to admit what had happened. One night, as Amanda was going over the guest lists, my phone rang. It was a text from Emily. "Hi, can we talk?" My heart raced as I looked at the message. 1,000 thoughts raced through my head. Should I respond? Should I ignore it? After a moment's hesitation, I typed a reply. "Sure. What's on your mind?" The answer came quickly. "Is there somewhere we can meet? I think we need to talk in person." I agreed and suggested a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. When I arrived, Emily was already there, sitting at a corner table. She looked different, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. When I sat down, she smiled weakly, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotion. "James," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't stop thinking about that night. I know it was wrong, but I don't regret it." I swallowed hard, not knowing what to say back. The cafe seemed suffocating, the walls closing in around us. "Emily," I started, but she held up a hand, stopping me. "I just need to know where we stand. What do you want? Because I can't keep pretending that Robert and I are okay, and I don't think you can either." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. For the first time, I had to face the reality of my actions and decide what I really wanted. It wasn't just about Emily or Amanda. It was about who I was and who I wanted to be.